The sound of gushing water filled the air as I stood ankle-deep in a puddle that shouldn't have existed, staring at the spot where my main supply pipe had been cleanly sawed off and capped with duct tape. A laminated sign read, "Unauthorized water use. HOA enforcement." The kicker? The HOA didn't even have jurisdiction over my land. But Corinne didn't know that I'm the one who built the water system she lives off of. And now she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. It started after a quiet 3-day fishing trip. I go off-grid once a month to clear my head, catch some trout, and leave the noise behind. No cell service, no emails, just the river and a cooler full of sandwiches. But when I returned to the ranch and turned on the tap to fill my dog's bowl, I noticed something off. No pressure. I tried the hose. Nothing. The sinks were dry. Out at the fence line, I found the problem. Where my main water pipe exited toward the lower pasture, the ground had been disturbed. Fresh tire tracks and boot prints ended at a section of PVC that was no longer connected. Someone had cut my water line. Not damaged cut. Deliberately. Then capped it with yellow HOA tape like it was a crime scene. A wooden stake held a flyer from the Willow Creek HOA, written in language that practically dripped with passive-aggressive cheer. It said all non-permitted irrigation sources attached to shared groundwater were being disconnected. I blinked at it for a good 5 minutes. My ranch sits on 47 acres of private land. It has never been part of the HOA. Not in any official document, lease, or county file. The pipe they cut was my line from my reservoir built and buried with my own hands in a rented backhoe in 1993. I walked the perimeter to be sure there was no other damage. But I did notice the tire marks a silver Lexus SUV's distinct pattern. And one boot print had a broken heel. Karen. I'd recognize those rhinestone-studded sandals anywhere. She wore them like she was on a runway, even picking up dog poop. So I took pictures, logged the damage, and then walked back to my barn, whistling. Not from happiness, but because I knew something Karen didn't. Years ago, when the HOA development was being planned, the builders struck a deal with me. They didn't want to pay the city for infrastructure, so I offered to extend my water line to service their 30 homes. They paid a small monthly fee and maintained their own pump. The lease expired 10 years ago, but the system was still mine. Every drop that flows to their sprinklers, toilets, and koi ponds comes from beneath my land. And now, they had just cut me off from my own pipe, thinking they were enforcing some rule. Karen probably strutted back to her HOA meeting feeling like she'd scored a win against the outlaw rancher next door. Maybe she even gave herself a gold star. But she gave me the green light. In my barn, behind a wall of hay bales, sits an old breaker box with 3 switches. One for the irrigation pump, one for the pressure valve, and the third, labeled backup flow gate, controls the entire HOA system. I flipped it off. One small flick and 29 homes, a clubhouse, and 2 fountains went dry. By evening, I could hear Karen yelling from 4 properties away. Something about the Johnsons' pool draining mid-swim and the Miller twins clogging a toilet with cereal. Someone called a plumber. Someone else called the county. I sat on my porch with a beer, watching sprinkler heads die across the cul-de-sac. I didn't want revenge. Not originally. But when someone cuts your water line, tapes a smug sign on it, and tries to fine you for it and you've spent decades maintaining the system that lets their lilies bloom, it becomes personal. Karen wanted to flex power over a man who had already walked away from politics. But she didn't know I still held the valve. As the sun dipped below the hills and HOA emails flew across inboxes, I tipped my hat to my dog and whispered, "Let the games begin." By sunrise, chaos had settled over Willow Creek. Sprinkler systems remained silent. Decorative fountains wheezed dry. Neighbors stood at their sinks, twisting taps to no avail. The group chat was frantic. Karen responded with vague optimism. Temporary issue. Technician is investigating. But by mid-morning, even her lawn had browned. Her koi pond was a swamp. I sat in the shade with my coffee and binoculars, watching Karen storm from house to house in a pristine white blouse and clipboard in hand. She kicked a garden gnome, nearly slipped on a wet patch of sidewalk. Eventually, I wandered to the gate between my ranch and the cul-de-sac. Karen saw me and charged like a storm. "You shut off the water, didn't you?" "I've just been minding my business," I said. "Maybe your board cut the wrong pipe." She blinked. The thought hadn't crossed her mind. "You were stealing water from the HOA system." The pipe I installed before your HOA even existed? The one that draws water from my reservoir. She hesitated. Then why does the HOA lose water when your valve is off? Because you never built your own system. You've been running off mine. The lease expired. You didn't renew. You're trespassing on my infrastructure. You're bluffing. Check the county records. Right next to the zoning paperwork that says your authority ends at the decorative hedge. She stared at me, gears grinding. I could see her certainty unraveling. By lunchtime, the HOA group chat was a civil war. David, a quiet neighbor who once got fined for planting an apple tree, sent me screenshots. Residents were furious. Kids were crying about the dry splash pad. Someone mentioned dissolving the HOA entirely. A few hired plumbers. One rented a water truck. None succeeded. Without my pump, the lines had no pressure. That evening, a silver pickup pulled into my drive. A contractor named Miguel stepped out. "Sir, someone from the HOA asked me to reconnect a line here, but judging by the markers, this is your land. That pipe's mine too. Touch it without permission and I'll press charges." Miguel nodded. "Got it. You're not the first with HOA problems. I'll mark it inaccessible and bill them." I offered him a soda. We talked on the porch. That night, I received a $10,000 fine in my mailbox. Unauthorized irrigation. Signed by Karen. I placed it on my desk and drafted a response not to the board, but to every homeowner. I explained the water system history. Offered to restore service for a modest fee. One condition, Karen resigns. At dawn, I hand-delivered each letter. No threats, just facts. The response was faster than I imagined. By noon, voicemails filled my phone. Residents thanking me. Ready to sign. Tired of Karen's reign. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting. I attended quietly. Karen stood before the crowd, ranting about sabotage and fake documents. Then Mr. Tran, a retired land use attorney, stood up, confirmed everything I wrote. Silence. Then questions. Why did Karen spend HOA money on planners? Why no board elections? Her power dissolved. Karen announced a unity barbecue, rented grills, promised a water truck. It never came. The only spigot I left active sprayed sulfur well water. The misting fan she hooked up sprayed rotten egg stench. The party collapsed in minutes. I didn't celebrate. I waited. Sure enough, the next morning Karen, disguised in sweats and sunglasses, tried sneaking onto my land. She began reconnecting the pipe. I flipped a switch. Red foam burst from the valve. Karen screamed, coated head to toe. I called the sheriff. Deputies arrived, saw my footage, and escorted her away. By evening, screenshots of Karen's foamy meltdown were on the neighborhood forum. A local reporter arrived. I showed her everything. The reservoir, the lease, the control panel. The story aired that night. Rancher reclaims water rights. Karen's face, red and furious, plastered every news feed. More residents signed my agreement. Water flowed again. Except to Karen. Her lawn died. Her house became a ghost. At the next HOA meeting, every hand voted to remove her. Leonard, the nervous board member, asked me to speak. I did. Briefly. I said I wasn't out for revenge. Just fairness. I restored water. On one condition, no more HOA interference on my land. The room applauded. Neighbors came by afterward. Thanked me. Some brought their kids to see the chickens. Life resumed. The sprinklers danced. Karen's house stayed dry. She never signed the agreement. Rumors swirled she tried selling. But no buyers wanted a dry house with bad press. One asked if the sprinkler incident was real. It was. I returned to my routine. Then one evening, I showed Mr. Tran the hidden pump house. The real Sauersee deep aquifer well. 42 feet down. Built after the lease expired. Quietly. Just in case. A week later, anonymous flyers appeared. Claimed my agreement was unfair. Urged residents to demand the HOA build its own system. No one listened. One brought it to me, laughing. Then a county official showed up. Said he heard the neighborhood used private infrastructure. I gave him a tour. Showed him documents, signed agreements. He left with a handshake and said, "You ought to teach a class." That month, Karen moved out. No goodbye. Her name erased from records. The HOA charter rewritten. Residents took charge. I replaced the sign on my gate. Private land. Private water. Mutual respect required. And every morning, without fail, The sprinklers clicked on across Willow Creek. Not because I demanded it, because I kept my word. I didn't want power. I wanted peace. And all it took to restore it was a pipe, a plan, and the patience to let the pressure speak.